Speaking of smart moves, not every move at the trade deadline is a smart move. As fans, we love to see action at the trade deadline. Usually it doesn't happen on deadline day. It's like a couple days before, a couple weeks before. Sometimes they pan out, and sometimes they turn into an absolute nightmare. So today we are talking about the moves that didn't quite work out, and perhaps some moves in the future that, if they're made this deadline, that's sure to be a nightmare. So we're going to try and come up with some scenarios that would just be an absolute nightmare for some teams. Who wants to play the role of R.L. Stein here?
Well, that's a good reference.
That's Goosebumps?
Yeah.
Goosebumps,
with
baby.
the dog and the piano and the song. Anyways, this has nothing to do with the deadline. R.L. Stein, get to it.
I'll knock this one off easy because this is the one that I'm pretty sure everybody knows, and it's Ben Sherratt. We're like,
from your Winnipeg Jets.
Not this year.
Well, and I know like even you and like Ben Sherratt seemed to play pretty well against the Leafs last year in the playoffs. So like there's obviously some things that like maybe people will tend to value, but in my mind, if people are still going that kind of like, you look at David Savard last year and obviously it worked out well for Tampa, but at the same time, if you look at David Savard last year, I think most people were like, first and a third for him or whatever they traded. Like that feels like a lot. And if Ben Sherratt goes for something similar to that, to me that's
it's been rumored, right, that they want a first round pick for him.
Yeah, and the Leafs have been connected to him quite a bit, so that's why. But a lot of teams have been connected to him too, and so like
I think a team would give up a first. I don't know how much more than a first you're going to give up though.
The one thing I think that makes a bit of a difference too is what team you are, because like I don't even think Tampa can really make a bad trade at this point. That some like obviously unless they really give up like a key piece and make a terrible deal or something. But at the same time, like if Tampa gives up a first round pick to try and go on another run, nobody's really going to question that. If like Nashville gives up a first round pick or someone like that, even like I look at a team like Boston who just have a terrible prospect pool. For Boston, I think like they have pretty good depth on their team. If I was a Boston fan, I would be rattled if they traded a first or something for more depth. If they go after like Giroux or Hurdle or something, I mean, go for it, right? Because like that's like a game-changing player that could genuinely like kind of put you over the top, as opposed to like, again, Ben Sherratt, you probably play on your bottom pair.
Part of this, I mean, as you just pointed out, like the cupboard's got to have some stuff in it. And I mean, the Avs, they're probably going to make some moves, and they have some pieces they can move. What's a nightmare scenario for them potentially then?
I think it's honestly not making any moves. Like that's my nightmare scenario because they haven't made, and like I've looked at Joe Sakic's trade history, and last year before the deadline, they got like Patrick Nemeth, they got Carl Soderberg back, and they just brought in depth. And again, part of it is the position they're in because they don't have a lot of cap space to make a lot of moves, but at the time they had a first round pick and they traded that for Darcy Kemper in the summer. But Sakic tends to make his deals not on deadline day. It's usually in the summer, it's usually before. So I think their window is open now though. Like you look at the Western Conference, this is their time to make it to a Stanley Cup final. I think now, especially with Hale McCarr locked in, Landeskog locked in, Rantanen locked in, Gerard locked in. The only other guy is McKinnon when they're going to work on him and get him locked in. So, I don't know. You've got a lot of contracts coming off the books next year. Take a swing and go after a hurdle. Give me something good here.
Regardless, though, like, this is the best team in the league. Like I think even if Colorado doesn't make a move, you should still feel pretty confident about your chances.
But like again, because when you look at that, everybody would have said Vegas is probably like regardless of getting Jack Eichel, top 3 team in the league, and then they added Jack Eichel. Like that's huge, and that's probably their number one competitor, right? That you would think that, man, that's pretty intimidating.
Calgary added to Foley. Like I mean he's been playing great for them as we record this. So just like doing something of substance.
So out of everyone in this room, I feel like you're the biggest Rangers supporter, Jesse, as far as believing that they're more than whatever their analytics will say they are. What do you think a nightmare scenario for them is? Because, I mean, people want them to do something at the deadline. What's something you think might be like, yikes, if you don't or do it?
I don't know, giving up the house for like a good, not great scorer. Like, I think, like, you got to hit a home run if you're the Rangers, if you're going to make a big move here. You know, don't mortgage everything that you've created. Don't mortgage your future for someone who's just, like, not going to really get it done for you this year. If you can get a guy like Claude Giroux, I think, like, or Hurdle, you know, like, if you're the Rangers, you go for it. Like, you need scoring depth, and you have pieces to make a run. You have a great goaltender. Don't settle for mediocrity. You're a massive market. People want to go to your team. People want to go to your city. Swing for the fences. The Rangers have a big opportunity in front of them. They're in a stacked East. The Rangers, to me, I don't know why, and I could be wrong. They could end up losing in the first round, and like I wouldn't be surprised. But not to just like cover my.
I heard you pump their tires. I think you'd be a little surprised if they lost in the first round.
Like man, if they played
Gas 'em
Pittsburgh
up.
in the first, if they
You've
played
been
Pittsburgh,
gassing them up pretty good.
yeah, because I believe in the Rangers. But then again, like if they played Pittsburgh and lost, I'd be like, okay, like they played like Crosby and Malkin and Letang and Jari who's playing okay. Like
I genuinely feel like there's really no bad teams in the East.
there's none.
No.
There's
Whoa.
no.
So, not the whole Eastern Conference. In the Eastern playoff.
Like the-
How about the Capitals? They haven't been that great.
But they're a team that like if they get hot heading into playoffs, they have the core to.
Wouldn't you
to
say
do
though
it.
of like the teams that are like established in a playoff
That's who I'd wanna
spot,
play.
you'd want to play the Capitals, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
But at the same time,
I also
in
don't.
the same way, again, if you're giving me those 8 teams, I'm
That's
picking
your
them
options.
100% of the time. But at the same time, you got that roster. I think anytime you'd look at that and you'd be like, they could really upset anybody. Like not in terms of you're going to bet on them to do it, but if it happens, I don't think anybody would be like, whoa.
You can make a case for anyone in the East to go on a run.
I could also
Yeah,
make
sure.
a case that you should definitely take those glasses. What happened? That went
Showtime.
unaddressed. Went
Showtime.
unaddressed.
Yeah, it looks like he's trying to hide a shiner or
Yeah,
something.
what happened? Is that what-
Like,
no,
I think it
much
went
happened.
unaddressed because at this point it's just whatever Jesse wears, he wears.
Let's
Like
go,
we're not
let's go.
surprised
Doesn't
anymore.
surprise anyone.
No.
Says the guy in the bucket hat.
Yeah, the bucket hat.
The guy in a bucket hat's calling you out right now.
But
You
okay,
got
so
some wardrobe changes.
So we've talked. We talked about the Rangers. I honestly think we need to have a talk about the Jets because I'm not just saying that. No, I'm not just saying this because I'm a Jets fan.
Yes, you are.
Okay, you call it what you want, but I think that the Jets are probably the #1 most interesting team to look out for on trade deadline day right now because we don't know what position the Jets are
I was
going
going to say, do you
Okay,
mean because
so-
they could sell as well? Is that what you're saying?
Andrew Kopp, for example. You could get serious value for a guy like Andrew Kopp. I think Andrew Kopp can pitch a first-round pick.
That's my nightmare scenario if I'm the Rangers.
For the Rangers, exactly.
That's kind of my nightmare scenario if I'm like any contender.
I just think a depth piece for a first round pick is just like
Like I've been going through some of these
Depends the
just
team.
like trade deadline histories and like Paul Gostad was fetching first round picks and like I know they're late picks but like it's still a first round pick. You're hoping to get someone better than that.
Yeah, I mean, well, again, you can look at late first round picks and see a bunch of gems in there in the
Yep.
past years. So like that scares me 100%. Would you consider the Jets buying anything a nightmare? Because I like imagine like the real nightmares.
Drag
for
'em.
you. Well, no, I just imagine. So even
I agree. I think
for the
this is
Rangers,
valid.
No,
for
I
the
think so too.
Rangers and the Jets. Like
Yeah.
if the Jets buy and then they don't make the playoffs, which again, I'm not trying to take a shot or anything. It's looking
Take the
likely
shots.
that they won't make the playoffs.
No, for sure. Honestly, the only thing I think is going to happen, I think Andrew Kopp is going to get traded. Get a first for Kopp. We'll start to bring some younger guys
That's
into
not
our
a nightmare
roster.
for
more-
you guys. Like that's fine. Right?
It's a fine situation, but it's like, okay, next year you got to figure things out. Chevy better get a good head coach, and you better be back in the playoffs next year. Or
Sounds like a
I'm
threat.
Man,
Chevy.
Paul-
Jesse's coming for your job, buddy.
yeah.
Chevy, watch out.
Ron
Yes.
Francis, you're off the hook.
Jesse
That
from
guy
the
would
top
never be
rope.
off- Ron Francis will never be off the hook. That guy absolutely ruined the Kraken.
I mean, but
After 1
hey,
year.
but like,
Ruined.
Not even a
1 year.
season.
Look,
in.
Not even
look.
gonna look at it. Not even gonna see it through.
Let me
He's
say-
ruined them.
Let me say this as they're done. Let me say this as a Jets fan, okay? Chevy's been with the team for a long time, and he's done a great job. He's made a lot of great moves, and I understand why the Jets would probably never feel comfortable ever letting him go because he's a great mind, and he's done a great job building the team. It was a slow burn. But I'm telling you, with this core right now, if you don't find the right coach and if you don't get back in the playoffs next year, yeah, there is pressure on Chevy.
How many different teams would it potentially be a nightmare for to not go after Marc-Andre Fleury or just like a hot
to
goalie?
not go after?
To not go after.
Going after goalies?
I was just
is
gonna say that's my nightmare.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like,
that's
like
my
trying
nightmare.
to figure out whatever the hell is going on with any goalie at any time and thinking that just because you trade for a guy that has some pedigree means you're going to be solid is just wild thinking in my mind. Like,
So you
And like guys at pedigree, like you could do Holtby or you could do Fleury.
It's not just pedigree.
But-
This
but
is
whoa,
a guy
whoa.
coming off of like a monster season, and he played for a lousy franchise.
like
this
you
year.
think if the Oilers, like I mean, they have to look for goaltending. They can't just sit on their hands. It's
It
not a nightmare
scares
for them
me.
to go for a goalie, depending on what it obviously costs them, because you got to think about the future.
I
But
guess
that's any
if
other
you're,
team.
if you're the Oilers though, are you serious? Like, do you seriously think you're a goalie away? Because that's how I'd look at it.
Dude, you are one of the main things you are if you're Edmonton is a goalie away.
Yeah.
Like
I don't
that's
think so.
They have other pieces, but like, come
I
on,
think
man.
they
Like, of the
obviously
pieces
have
that are missing,
Draisaitl and McDavid. Yes,
of the
that's
pieces
fine.
that are missing, is that not the biggest one?
Yeah, I would argue that's the biggest
Yeah,
one.
for
But I
sure.
also still don't think if they get a guy at the deadline that's just a guarantee. Like it's fixed. They're a goalie away. They're fine. They're a legitimate Stanley
but
Cup contender.
at least it could be a solution.
The glasses
I'm
are
not
back
giving
on.
up a first round pick.
Sorry.
I'm not giving
Right
up a
here.
first round pick right now. In fact, they're not even a playoff spot right now, and you're going to give up a first round pick when you can just go sign one of these guys in free agency next
You
year.
could literally sign him.
You could sign him if you wanted. You could sign Holtby.
Maybe that's part of the deal.
Yeah, if they could lock him
Then
down.
don't give up a first round pick for it.
But
Are you
also
gonna
even
sign-
that.
Yeah.
But then what are you going to lock down Fleury to like a couple $1 million a year? Like what do you think? He might fetch like 3-4 million or something.
But also-
you lock him for 2 years and then what's he 37, 38? Now you're locked into another old goalie for a decent chunk of money.
And I would
Just
like,
won the
and I would
Vezina, though.
At the
also
same
say,
time,
though-
still way younger than Mike Smith.
And I would also say,
and
like,
Fleury's still like he's
he's
on
not-
a down year, but like man, this guy won the Vezina last year.
I know, but he was also playing in front of
On a
a
good
very
team.
great defensive team
Yeah.
and unit. He's not. Are they getting much of an upgrade going from Chicago to Edmonton as far as like a full decor goes?
all I'm saying is
I'd be
trading
worried.
for goalies scares me.
Is that
It's
what's
like,
next on your list? All
looking
right,
at the
Nightmare
list.
Factory, let's hear it.
Luca Nightmare Factory. As soon as he brought up his, I was like, okay, well, I should throw it there that one of my nightmare scenarios is just trading with Stevie Y or Joe Sakic.
Oh, you're
at
getting
all.
hosed.
Yeah, you're
Getting
getting hosed.
hosed.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
Last year, again, like everybody's like, oh, it was a pretty normal trade deadline year. Maybe you look at the Nick Foligno one, you're like, that's probably the worst trade. And then all of a sudden, Stevie Y's just like, Anthony Mantha for Jakub Vrana and a first. Vrana, I know he hasn't played this year, but still, like, I know I've told you guys, I'm excited to see him play for them. And obviously, like, Anthony Mantha's been okay for the Capitals, but like, definitely.
He was hurt for a bit too. Okay, but you know what? At the same time, Sakic made the right move when he traded for Kemper, but I think Arizona got great value.
They got a first round pick that's going to be like 20s or 30s,
What
and
was the
Connor
whole trade?
Timmons.
Come on,
Yeah.
that's a layup, Luca. That's when you go first round pick that's going to be 32nd overall.
Yeah, well,
That's what you
32nd
say.
overall, hopefully. No, they really didn't get much, man.
Are
It
you
wasn't
gonna
a
get
lot.
more? Are you gonna get that much more for Kemper though from any other team?
I don't know if you're
doubt
going to
it.
get
No, but-
more, but like it's not like
They didn't give up anything.
robbery. And like Kemper's been so
No,
good the
Rob-
past bunch of years that like I think that's just like a fair price.
I thought,
Yeah. It was a fair trade.
I thought it was fair. If
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. I don't.
Yeah.
I definitely don't think Colorado got ripped off, but I thought
No.
Arizona did well.
I think they did okay.
I'm also just saying like the only reason I say it is because like somebody goes, oh, you see the Leafs made a trade, and I go, oh no way, with who? And they go Detroit or Colorado. I'm like, ooh, what's
already
what's
happened
the
once
deal?
to the
Man,
Leafs.
I don't know though. I feel like Luca, to tie into what you were saying before, is this the year that maybe Sakic's gonna have to overpay a little to get what he wants to bring this team over the edge?
I'm just gonna rip off a couple other ones.
Sure.
Quick. Calgary Flames. If you don't get Mark Giordano, if they don't get Mark Giordano, I feel like that's a bit of a nightmare for me. Like,
Really?
yeah, because like
What nightmare? What?
Why is
Depends
that
how
a
much you give up.
nightmare?
Yeah.
Well,
Which
no.
is that's like all of this is how much do you give up? But okay, why?
Because, like, man, like,
The story.
he's available. We look at the TSN trade bait list, okay? If I'm Calgary, just in my mind,
You want to turn that brightness up?
Why don't
I
take
would
your
s-
ND filter off?
I just think in my mind, like, if I'm Calgary and it really seems like they're poised for a run, Mark Giordano's out there, and, like, I don't think he's going to fetch, like, a crazy amount. You know what I mean? Like, I haven't heard, again, I don't know, and maybe it's something where they have to give up a second-round pick or something like that for him. I want him on the squad. If I'm the Flames, like, that just makes sense to go for a run. Just, like, obviously, I think it's pretty natural now that he can probably take a bit of a lesser role on the team because now, obviously, they've shown how good they can be without him. I'm just thinking, as a Calgary Flames fan, if I am going into the playoffs and Mark Giordano's on a different team, I'm like, what a nightmare, you know? Like, because, like, imagine they go on a run and he doesn't get to win. Maybe I'm exaggerating a bit in terms of, like, nightmare for that one because, like, Calgary
Yeah,
Flames,
maybe
they're not going to...
That was definitely a nightmare. You
Let-
got a
let-
nightmare for the Wild on there because they got a lot in the cupboard. And again, I think you've mentioned it before. Bill Guerin might not want to build a team that way through a trade deadline. But you got anything on there for the Wild?
They're kind of a similar situation to me, like in terms of what, like I said, for a lot of the really good teams, is that like if they just make like a depth move, like what is that? You know, and like I genuinely just think that's a good way to say a nightmare for the Wild in general. A guy that I think would be a nightmare for a lot of teams, but actually might be pretty good for the Wild is John Klingberg. He basically is Tyson Barrie in my mind. Pretty good offensive defenseman, pretty terrible defensively, and good on the power play. He doesn't feel like a depth piece to me, but he feels just like a new addition, if that makes sense.
Impactful.
Yeah,
It's like a shiny toy.
You've got like a use for him other than like third pairing defenseman and like maybe you'll kill penalties every now and then and play in the second unit.
In division though, we're like, what do you have to give up for that?
I think
don't know.
that, like in
Klingberg
division
wants
thing
out.
Do you think
Yeah,
that? Do you
yeah.
think though that Bill Guerin is someone who's just gonna mortgage his team's future for?
Like,
a
is that
third?
more
how
how
much
much
you're-
future? Like, you give up a first and something. Like, again, I think a lot of teams that's kind of a night. Like, if the Leafs did that, I'd be like, oh god, like I would hate that because.
Well, especially after last year.
But I also just mean like in general, it's just like he's just not the guy they need.
Oh, like him specifically. You're saying.
yeah,
yeah,
it's like
that's fair.
well, I don't want like Colin Miller.
Absolute disrespect.
Maybe I'm wrong to say that I don't think that Guerin would give up something like that for a guy like Klingberg. I just feel as though it's not his style. Got rid of these two vets, and he's just like kind of looking to build his own monster. What I do think would be an interesting move, however, that he would be willing to make would be for JT Miller, because the Wild could use another star player, and that's a guy who could like really help them in the playoffs big time. I love JT Miller. By the way. That guy's absolute
he's great.
showtime.
We gotta remember too with the Wild, like those contracts that they bought out start to add up. What is it, next year?
Yeah.
On the cap, so like this might actually be the year where you got to do it. You have to go
Something
for it.
wrong?
This guy lost his
Did
shade.
someone take my sunglasses? I was about to go, guys, showtime, but I can't even go.
The man's
showtime.
useless without
That's
his
so sad
He's
about it.
heartbroken without his props.
Where are they?
They're over here. You couldn't be trusted.
JT Miller, you are.
Showtime.